The shouting started just as the boarding doors slid open. "Sir, I've already told you. You can't go down that jet bridge." All eyes at gate 37 turned toward the voice. The agent stood behind the counter in a neat navy blazer, lips pressed tight. Her badge swung slightly as she leaned forward, one hand splayed on the desk, the other pointing toward the old man on the other side of the podium. He was tall, though his shoulders rolled with age. Dark skin creased like weathered leather, hair close-cropped and silver. He stood perfectly still, a hard-shell case at his feet, its surface matte black and pristine. Across that case ran a narrow band of colors that made more than one person flinch. An American flag, folded and secured under clear plastic, was latched into the top. "I understand your policy," the old man said quietly. "But I'm a designated escort. The remains are on this aircraft. I need to be on that flight." The air seemed to thicken around him. Families pressed closer to their carry-ons. A toddler stopped mid-scream, staring. A businessman lowered his phone, earbuds dangling. From a few rows back, someone's camera came up, already recording. "Sir," the agent said, raising her voice, "I need you to stop yelling at me." He hadn't raised his voice. Not once. But her words landed on the crowd like a spark in dry grass. A few people shifted, uneasy. Someone murmured, "Here we go." The old man's gaze didn't move. "I'm not yelling," he said softly. "I'm just asking you to look at the paperwork again." The second agent, younger, with sharp cheekbones and a haircut that tried to look casual but screamed probationary, stepped beside the first. He folded his arms over his chest, glancing over the old man like he was scanning luggage. "What's the problem here, Denise?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the man. "He says it's some kind of escort," she replied, fingers curling in the air as if the word tasted bad. "But the reservation notes don't show any special authorization." He tried to push past the boarding lane. "I walked to the lane when you called pre-boards for military and special assistance," the old man corrected calmly. "I didn't push anyone." He wore an old, well-pressed suit, the kind that had seen countless church services and funerals. A small pin glinted on his lapel, dark green with gold trim. Most people wouldn't recognize it, but a skinny kid in a hoodie 2 rows back whispered, "Is that Army?" The younger agent stepped around the podium, coming closer. "Sir, you're holding up boarding. I'm going to need you to step aside and wait until your group is called." The old man glanced at the boarding sign, Groups 1 and 2, not yet lit, and then pointed, not to the sign, but to the small note under the screen where it scrolled through announcements. "Military escorts and families of the fallen may pre-board at any time," he read. "That's your policy, and that's me." The agent's jaw tightened. "You got documents?" he asked. The man bent slowly, knees protesting, and opened the zippered outer pocket of the case. He drew out a worn leather folder, edges polished by years of use, and flipped it open. "Department of Defense Form 1834, he said. "Official travel orders. My name is there. So's the flight number. So's the word escort." He held it out. The younger agent took it between 2 fingers like it might stain, scanned it for half a second, then snorted. "Anybody could print this off the internet," he said. "This doesn't have our logo on it. We need airline confirmation, not government paper." A sharp inhale stuttered from somewhere in the back. A man in a faded Marine's hoodie muttered, "What the hell?" under his breath. The first agent, Denise, was already tapping furiously into her workstation. "His name doesn't show any special status," she said, eyes on the screen. "No military ID entered. No escort code. Just basic economy, middle seat." Her lips curved with faint disdain as she said the last 2 words. "I gave the escort code to the check-in agent," the old man said. She nodded, said she'd added it. I watched her type. "Well, she didn't," Denise snapped. "And I can't just let anyone claim some special privilege because they say so. We have procedures." The camera phone in the back wavered closer. A woman in a yellow cardigan had it held high now, thumb steady on the screen, live comments already scrolling. At Travel Truths, "What's happening?" At Jayhawks 92, "They're messing with that old man." At Real Gloria, "He is a flag case OMG. So, step away from the gate." The younger agent's voice dropped lower now, the edge of threat creeping in. If you don't comply, I'm going to have to call security. The old man's hand stayed loose at his sides. Call them, he said. The word hung there, soft and immovable. Denise slammed her hand on the intercom. Attention passengers on Flight 2184 to Chicago. We're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated until further notice. A low groan rolled through the crowd. Man, I've got a connection, someone muttered. This is ridiculous, another voice chimed in. Just let him on. The younger agent ignored them. His hand hovered over the phone by the keyboard, fingers tapping. Last chance, he said. Move away from the gate. This is a secure area. If you try to force your way on, we can have you charged with interfering with a flight crew. The old man finally moved, not backward, but a single step forward. Just enough that his voice reached the back rows without needing to rise. I buried 6 soldiers in 20 years, he said quietly. I carried brothers off helicopters. I folded flags for mothers who couldn't stand. Today, I promised a woman I would walk her boy all the way home. I'm not leaving that boy alone on that plane. Silence. The only sound was the beeping of the jet bridge sensors and the faint hiss of air conditioning. The younger agent's lips thinned. You people think you can just. You people. The word shot from somewhere in the crowd. A middle-aged black woman, hair twisted into neat braids, pushed up from her seat, eyes blazing. I heard that, she said. We all heard that. The camera swung to her, then back to the agents. Denise went pale. That's not what he meant, she said quickly. Sir, please, don't make this about. About what? The woman in braids demanded. The old man lifted a hand, just a fraction. A tiny, weary gesture. It's all right, he said. But it wasn't. The live stream counter ticked past 500 viewers. In the chat, comments flew. At Skywatcher, some racist gate drama at Terminal CRN at VetDad 54. That's a flag case. That man is escorting a KIA. At Legal Gal, record everything. The younger agent picked up the desk phone. Security to gate 37, he said sharply. We have a non-compliant passenger interfering with boarding and making threats. I haven't threatened anyone, the old man answered, still calm. He bent again, lifting the case by its handle. The flag gleamed under the fluorescent lights, red and white stripes flattened under plastic. Put that down, Denise snapped. You can't carry that on. It needs to be checked. Several people swore out loud. Check a flag case? The Marine in the hoodie snarled, half rising. That's a human being you're talking about, not luggage. So, sit down or you'll be removed from the area. Denise barked, panic sharpening her tone. The old man straightened, the case by his leg like an anchor. I'm not moving, he said, and though his voice stayed gentle, something in it had the weight of steel doors closing. 2 uniformed airport security officers appeared at the edge of the crowd, hands resting on their belts. They're really calling security on him, someone whispered, incredulous. The woman with the phone stepped back to get everyone in frame. This is gate 37 at Jefferson International, she said to her live audience. Her voice trembled with indignation. They're denying boarding to a black veteran escorting a fallen soldier. Please share this. Tag the airline. Tag the news. The counter jumped again. 1,000. 2. The officers stopped by the gate podium. The younger agent spun toward them, relief flashing across his face. There, he said, jutting his chin at the old man. He won't move back. His harassing staff and trying to go down the jet bridge without authorization. Several people spoke at once. That's not what happened. He was just standing there. He showed you papers. The officer's eyes flicked from the agents to the old man to the camera phones, taking it all in. One of them, older, with salt at his temples, frowned when he saw the flag case. Sir, he said quietly, addressing the old man. Can we talk over here a minute? The old man didn't look away from the younger agent. I'm not interfering with anything, he said. All I've done is stand where your airline told me to stand, holding what your airline put on that plane. Denise threw up her hands. We're done with this, she said. Security, please remove him from the gate. If he resists, you do what you have to do. We have a schedule to keep. A collective intake of breath shuddered through the gate. The Marine in the hoodie muttered, "Oh, they messed up," under his breath. On the live stream, someone typed, "At NewsNoLocal, DM us. We want this footage." Another, "At Sky Justice. I know that man's face. No way they know who they're talking to." The old man finally shifted his gaze from the agent, just for a heartbeat, glancing toward the windows where the plane sat like a quiet animal at the end of the jet bridge. He exhaled once, a steadying breath. "Son," he said to the nearest security officer, "before you lay a hand on me, you might want to run my name." The officer blinked. "Your name?" The old man's eyes, dark and deep as wet earth, met his. "Colonel Thomas Reed," he said softly. "United States Army, retired. Escorting Specialist Marcus Daniels, KIA, Afghanistan, 24 years old. And I strongly suggest you verify who asked your airline to put his body on that plane in the first place." The gates seemed to pause, every motion arrested mid-breath, mid-blink. Denise frowned, already annoyed. "That doesn't change." But the older security officer had straightened, a flicker of recognition passing over his face like a shadow. "Wait," he murmured. "Reed, as in?" He looked again at the pin on the old man's lapel. The live stream zoomed in, the chat exploding. "At Military Brat. No way, that's The Reed at History Buff. Isn't he the guy who?" The younger agent scoffed, oblivious. "I don't care if you're the King of England," he said. "You're not boarding this aircraft." Colonel Thomas Reed's gaze didn't waver. But high above Gate 37, in a corner office on the 22nd floor of the airline's headquarters, hundreds of miles away, a phone was already buzzing on a polished wood desk. It would be answered, and when it was, everything at Gate 37 would begin to reverse. 2. Earlier that day, 6 hours earlier, Thomas Reed's alarm went off in the dark. He lay staring at the ceiling for a moment, letting the sound buzz against the fragile quiet of morning. Bone-deep tiredness pressed down on him, the kind that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from years. He turned it off with a careful, deliberate motion and sat up. His knees protested. His back crackled like old wood. He waited for the pain to settle into its familiar shape before he stood. The house around him was small but tidy, everything in its place. Photos lined the hallway, some in color, some in fading black and white. Young men in fatigue squinted into desert light. A younger version of him shook hands with a president. A boy in a football jersey grinned up at the camera, helmet under his arm. His grandson. Thomas paused there, as he always did, fingertips hovering just above the glass, not quite touching. "Morning, kid," he murmured. He went into the kitchen, set coffee to percolate, and unfolded the note on the table. It was written in neat cursive on lined paper. "Granddad, remember to take your blood pressure meds before you leave. Don't argue. I'll know if you skip. I laid out your suit. Don't forget the extra pair of socks. Planes are cold. And remember, if it gets to be too much today, call me. I don't care what time. Love, Maya." He smiled despite himself. "I'm taking the damn pills," he said aloud, as if she were there to hear him. "Fussy child." He took them. In the bedroom, the suit was draped over the chair. Dark charcoal, still sharp at the seams though it had been bought more than a decade ago. His shoes, polished to a dull shine, waited beside the bed. He dressed slowly, fingers steady on the buttons, slipping movements born from years of uniform inspections and funerals. On the dresser, next to his watch, lay the pin he always wore on days like this. Not his highest medal, not the one that would have made strangers stop and stay. Just the modest insignia of his unit. The men he bled with, the ones he couldn't bring home. He pinned it to his lapel and checked the mirror. The man looking back wasn't the colonel the world remembered. The news crews and documentaries had captured him when his posture was still straight as a rifle, eyes hard as stone. The man in the mirror had softer edges, lines carved deeply around his mouth, gray threading through his hair like winter streaking a field. But the eyes were the same. He picked up the phone from the charger. A text blinked at the top of his screen. "This is Angela Daniels. We up. Thank you again for doing this. Colonel, I don't know how we'd walk through today without you." He typed back, slowly. "It's my honor." Marcus was one of ours. I'll bring him home. He hesitated, thumb hovering, then added, I promise. He slid the phone into his jacket and went to the closet at the end of the hall. Inside, under a garment bag, lay the hard-shell case. He lifted it with both hands, the weight familiar. It was empty this morning. It always traveled empty on the way there. On the way back, it would come off the cargo lift with silent ceremony, the flag already folded inside. He had learned the rituals years ago, back when escort duty had been something he assigned to junior officers. Then, one afternoon in Kandahar, a young lieutenant had knocked on his door, eyes rimmed in red. Sir, he had said. The family. They asked if someone who knew him could bring him home. Not just someone from the unit. Someone who actually. Thomas had understood. He went himself. Once. Then again. And again. After retirement, when the uniform hung unused and the war shifted to History Channel specials, the calls still came. Mothers. Fathers. Wives. Brothers. Sometimes the army itself when a family was too shattered to handle the arrangements. He never said no. The airline didn't know any of that, of course. Not directly. All they saw were codes, escort requests, special handling forms. But up in their headquarters was a framed photo. It showed a much younger CEO, in a suit too big for him, standing on a tarmac beside a formation of soldiers. In the center of the image, a colonel in full dress uniform shook his hand, presenting a folded flag. The caption underneath read, Honoring our heroes' partnership, Year 1. That colonel's name was on a plaque too, mounted in the lobby next to the Veterans Advisory Council charter the airline loved to trot out in marketing campaigns. In the early days of that partnership, Thomas had flown to their headquarters several times a year. He'd sat in boardrooms, politely explaining why loading a casket like any other freight was unacceptable, why escort officers needed pre-boarding, why a flag-draped transfer case could never, under any circumstance, be separated from the escort by policy or scheduling convenience. He'd thought they'd listened. Today would test that. He arrived at the airport 2 hours early, as always. Old habits. You showed up early for missions like this. You padded the time for everything that could go wrong. The taxi driver helped him with the case, eyes lingering on the flag across the top. Thank you for your service, he said, a little awkwardly. Thomas gave the small, practiced nod he always did. The young man in this case is the one you thank, he said gently. I just get him where he's going. Inside the terminal, fluorescent lights buzzed and polished floors gleamed. Travelers hurried past, rolling suitcases in a low, constant thunder. A teenager manning the check-in counter straightened a little when he saw the case. Sir, is that? Yes, Thomas answered. I'm the escort. The boy swallowed. Thank you. One moment. He typed with quick, nervous fingers, eyes flicking between the screen and the case. Okay, I see the notation here. Military human remains, escort required. I'm supposed to enter code when I see that. He fumbled with a laminated card taped to the desk. Here we go. Escort pre-board authorization. He glanced up with a slightly relieved smile. Got it. I'll add this to your reservation so they know at the gate. You'll be able to pre-board at any time, sir. And the case? Thomas asked. Will they bring it to me at the gate or will I need to meet it on the tarmac? The boy squinted at the screen. It says here it'll be loaded with priority cargo, special handling. Normally we don't allow anyone near the aircraft while loading, but... Thomas slid a different document onto the counter. The boy's eyes widened at the letterhead. Department of Defense Directive, Thomas said. It states the escort must be present and have line of sight during transfer. The boy nodded, jaw tightening. Yes, sir. I'll call a supervisor to make sure they know. I'm sorry for the circumstances. So am I, Thomas murmured. He moved through security with the weary patience of someone who had seen far worse than TSA. Shoes off, belt in the bin, laptops out. The agent's eyes softened when they saw the case. Sir, I'm going to do a swab test on the outside for explosives, they said. We won't open it. Of course, Thomas replied. It's empty right now. That'll change on the way back. Their hands hesitated, just for a second, over the flag. At the gate, He found a seat with a clear view of the boarding podium and the windows. He always sat where he could see everything, the better to intervene if something went sideways with the cargo crew, or if a Harrogate agent tried to rush boarding before the transfer. He opened the leather folder on his lap, smoothing out the orders. Specialist Marcus Daniels, 24, Kia, single, survived by his mother, Angela, and sister, Jasmine. He'd read the file twice already, but he read it again, learned the details like he always did. They mattered. "Excuse me," a voice said softly. He looked up. A young woman stood there, mid-20s, wearing leggings and an oversized sweater. Her eyes were red and puffy above a crumpled tissue. She clutched a carry-on bag to her chest like a shield. "Yes, Thomas said. You're Colonel Reed, right?" she asked. From the news. He'd been in a documentary once, years back. The Faces of Service series. They dramatized things, added swelling music and slow-motion shots of flags. It embarrassed him. "I used to be," he said mildly. "Now I'm just Tom." She swallowed. "My brother." He served. 82nd. He made it home, but he wasn't the same. "I just wanted to say, thank you for what you do." Her voice broke. His face softened. "What's his name?" "Devon. Is he doing all right these days?" She hesitated. "He's trying." "That counts," Thomas said gently. "Sometimes that's the hardest part." She nodded, biting her lip. "You flying for business?" he asked. She looked at the departure screen, at the flight number. "No, I'm going to meet him. He's been in a program. He asked if I could come." Thomas smiled, small and warm. "Then you're doing your part too." She surprised him by leaning forward and squeezing his hand. "Whoever you're escorting today," she whispered, "they're lucky to have you with them." He watched her leave with a heaviness in his chest that had nothing to do with age. When the boarding agent arrived, Denise, though he didn't know her name yet, he watched her out of the corner of his eye. She moved like someone who had been doing this a long time. Efficient, hurried, slightly impatient. She didn't glance at the empty flag case beside him. He checked his watch. The current leg of the mission was straightforward: fly to Chicago. Meet the mortuary affairs officer on the tarmac. Witness the transfer into the case. Walk with the team as they carried Specialist Daniels' body up the ramp. Then sit on that plane like a quiet sentinel until it landed in Atlanta, where the family would be waiting. He'd done this dance enough times to know all the steps. He did not know that the system the kid at check-in had updated would crash and reboot 10 minutes before boarding started. That the escort pre-board authorization code he'd painstakingly added would vanish into digital limbo. That Denise was on her last warning for failing to enforce boarding procedures and had recently endured a bitter lecture about never bending rules for pushy passengers. He did not know that the young man coming on shift beside her would spend his lunch break scrolling through social media accounts that mock entitled boomers and fake veterans looking for free perks. He did not know any of that. He only knew that somewhere, on a base far away, a small group of soldiers were preparing to load a flag-draped transfer case into the belly of a plane with shaking hands, and that he had promised a mother her boy would not make that journey alone. As the gate area filled and people jockeyed for position near the boarding lanes, he ran a hand over the smooth plastic of the case, feeling his heartbeat steady against the familiar undercurrent of grief. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing in memory the soft rustle of dress uniforms, the crack of rifle salutes, the echoing sobs of families in church pews. Then he straightened, squared his shoulders, and waited. 3. Back to the gate. Now. Back at gate 37, his knees ached and his patience was thinning, but not yet gone. "Colonel Reed," the older security officer repeated, eyes narrowing. He glanced at the younger agent. "You didn't tell us he was a military escort." "He says he is," the younger agent scoffed. "But the system doesn't show anything. We can't just take his word for it." "System crashed earlier," someone shouted from the rows of seats. They announced it over the speakers. "Maybe that's why." "Stay out of this." Denise snapped in that direction, eyes flashing. The crowd did not stay out of it. The live stream now hovered near 5,000 viewers. Comments flew so fast they blurred. "At Veteran Mom, call the news station." Tag them. At Airport Insider. If that's Reed, he literally helped write the escort policy. At Abject, this airline about to have a bad day. The woman in braids stepped forward, planting herself near the edge of the boarding lane, arms folded. You're holding up this entire flight, she told the agents, voice cutting through the murmurs. Because you don't want to admit you messed up. Denise's jaw clenched. If you don't sit down, we'll have to ask you to leave the area as well. The Marine in the hoodie snorted. What are you gonna do? Cancel everyone's flights because we're not letting you bully that man. The younger agent's face reddened. Security, he said sharply. Remove these disruptive passengers. Now. The older officer did not move. Instead, he took out his phone, thumb tapping quickly, eyes flicking between the screen and Thomas. So, he said quietly, ignoring the agent for the moment. Do you have military ID? Thomas nodded. In my wallet. Would you mind if I took a look? Of course not. Thomas pulled out a worn leather wallet and flipped it open. The officer took the ID card, studying it. His eyes widened. Oh, hell, he breathed. The younger agent leaned in, trying to see. What? He print that at home too. The officer shot him a sharp look. This is a retired 06 with 30 years service and a silver star, he said. Show some respect. Somewhere in the crowd, someone hissed through their teeth. The Marine in the hoodie muttered, told you they messed up. Denise's mouth flattened. He still doesn't have pre-board authorization in our system, she insisted. I'm not risking my job over this. You're risking a lot more than that, the woman with the phone said. There are thousands of people watching you right now. The younger agent rolled his eyes. Oh, no, the internet, he drawled. What? You gonna cancel me on TikTok? Yes, she shot back. And your airline with you. His sneer grew. You think anyone's gonna care about some old guy causing a scene at a gate when we say he was being aggressive? You people always play the victim. And he didn't get to finish that sentence. The older security officer stepped between them, his voice suddenly crisp. Enough, he said. You, stop talking. You, he turned to Denise, go print a copy of the manifest and the special handling notes. Now, I want to see what's in your system. We're not supposed to share internal. Now. Something in his tone cut through her resistance. She huffed but turned to the computer, fingers flying over the keys, then the printer. As she waited, she flicked her eyes over the crowd, noticing the phones, the steady recording. Suddenly, reality seemed to dawn a little. Not entirely, but enough to crack her composure. So, she said to Thomas, voice sugary with forced politeness. If you just waited until your group was called, none of this would have been necessary. I did wait, Thomas replied, until you called for military and special assistance. She opened her mouth, then closed it because she had indeed said those precise words. The printer word. She snatched the manifest and flipped through it. Her fingers stopped halfway down the page. Her face tightened. Hey, the older officer said, holding out his hand. Let me see. Reluctantly, she handed it over. He scanned it. In the margin, highlighted, were the codes for human remains, military and escort required. Beneath that, in smaller print, the words. Escort name, COL Thomas Reed, USA, Ret. Must remain with flight at all times. The officer lifted his gaze slowly. You missed this? He asked. Denise swallowed. The system crashed earlier. It must have. But it's right here now, he said. And instead of double-checking when this gentleman presented documents, you escalated. He was arguing. He was following the policy, the officer said, tapping the line about pre-boarding. You're the one who forgot your own airline's rules. The younger agent flushed dark red. I'm not just letting him walk down there, he snapped. That case needs to be checked. He's not special. Oh, he's special. All right, a new voice said. It came from behind them, from the side door of the gate area where a harried-looking man in a blazer slightly nicer than Denise's hurried in, badge swinging. His name tag read, Mark Simmons, station manager. I just got 3 calls in 5 minutes, he announced, out of breath. What's going on here? Denise pounced. This man is trying to board with an authorized carry-on and refused to step aside when asked. We called security. Passengers are getting agitated. The station manager turned to Thomas, taking in the case, the pin, the calm in his posture. Then he saw the woman with the phone, the little red dot of live, the thousands of watching eyes. His stomach visibly dropped a fraction of an inch. "Sir," he said, forcing a smile, "I'm sure we can sort this out. Could you step over here so we can talk privately?" "This needs to be private," the younger agent muttered. "We don't need the whole airport." "It absolutely does not need to be private," the woman in braids said. "You humiliated him in front of all of us. You don't get to fix it in a broom closet." Mark's smile tightened. "If you could please." "No," she said. Several heads nodded in agreement. The live stream's chat flooded. "At Civil Rights. Don't go off camera at FlySmart. They always try to handle it internally at Journalist Gen. We're clipping this for tonight's segment." Mark's smile wavered. "So," he tried again, looking at Thomas. "If you'll just step to the side, we can get you on the next flight and maybe upgrade you for the inconvenience." Thomas lifted the case again, slowly, as if it weighed far more than mold plastic and empty air. "There is a soldier on this flight," he said. "He is not an inconvenience. He is not luggage. And I will not abandon his escort because your staff are afraid to admit they were wrong." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gate. Mark's jaw worked. He glanced at the printed manifest in the officer's hand. "What's that?" he asked. "Your special handling notes," the officer replied, handing it to him. "You might want to read them." As Mark's eyes tracked the highlighted lines, something like a pale tide rolled under his skin. "I see," he said slowly. Thomas watched him, quiet. He'd seen this look before, on young lieutenants realizing they'd misread a map, on politicians caught contradicting a memo they'd signed. It was the look of someone trying to calculate whether to dig in or back down. "So," Mark began, "it appears there may have been a misunderstanding. If you'll just—" "A misunderstanding is when you misspeak," the woman with the phone cut in. "This was discrimination and negligence, and now it's lived to thousands of people. Millions, probably, by tonight," the Marine added. Mark swallowed. "Look," he said, voice brittle. "I understand everyone's upset, but we need to get this flight out on time. So, if we let you board now, will you agree not to pursue this further? We'll add miles to your account. We'll—" He cut himself off as his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He fumbled it out, glanced at the screen, and went even paler. "Caller ID, Corporate HQ, Ops Director." He stepped back a pace, thumb shaking as he answered. "Hi, this is Mark," he said. Whatever came through that speaker was inaudible to the crowd, but they saw its impact. His shoulders sagged. His eyes jumped to the live camera, then to Thomas. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I understand. No, I didn't know. No, we did not. I mean, we're working on it now. Yes, the media, I see." He swallowed. The woman with the phone edged closer, angling, trying to catch his words. The chat exploded with, "At lip reader, his getting chewed out LMAO at Pranightmare. Ops Director, this is big." Thomas watched, not unkindly. He did not enjoy watching someone be dressed down. But part of him, the part that had watched bureaucracy fail soldiers over and over, felt a grim satisfaction that someone above this gate finally understood the severity. Mark cleared his throat, nodding at whatever he was being told. "Yes," he said again. His right hey. "Yes, I'll put you on speaker." His thumb hesitated over the button. His eyes flicked to Thomas. "Sir, the operations director would like to speak with you," he said, voice suddenly deferential. "On speaker, if that's all right." The young agent's head snapped up. Why would Ops be calling him? Denise looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Thomas considered for a beat, then nodded once. "All right," he said. Mark pressed the speaker icon and held the phone up. A woman's voice poured into the space, sharp and composed, carrying the faint echo of a large office. "Colonel Reed," she said. "This is Karen Patel, Director of Operations for Continental Skyways. Can you hear me?" Every head at Gate 37 swiveled to Thomas. "Yes," he replied. I can't hear you. First, she said, I want to offer my personal apology and the apology of this airline for what you have experienced at our gate this morning. This is not in line with our policies, our training, or our values, especially not with regards to military escorts and families of the fallen. Mark looked like he wanted to shrink. The younger agent frowned. Wait, military escorts. He actually is. Hush, the older security officer muttered. The director's voice continued, carrying a steel undercurrent. Second, she said, for the record, as you well know, Colonel, you helped us write the very procedures your escort status falls under. The fact that your name is on our Veterans Advisory Council plaque and no one at that gate recognized it is deeply concerning. The gate became very, very quiet. The live stream camera swung between Thomas and the staff. Comments flew across the screen. At OMG, he's on their advisory board? At Soldier's Daughter, they really screwed up. At Pragai, this is Defcon 1 for their PR team. The reversal had begun. For the reversal. Thomas had never liked having his name on walls. Memorial walls were necessary. Yes, they honored sacrifice. But his own photo in corporate lobbies, his name engraved on plaques, that had always made him uncomfortable. Service, to him, was about the work, not the recognition. Right now, though, watching Denise's hand tremble on the edge of the counter and the younger agent's bravado shrivel, he was reluctantly grateful that somewhere in a glass-fronted building, his name had meant enough to make a director pick up the phone. Colonel, Patel's voice continued, we are watching a live stream from your gate right now, and I can see you, as well as our employees. I want to thank you for maintaining your composure under what appears to be unacceptable treatment. Thomas's eyes slid to the woman with the phone. She gave him a faint nod, her face tight. I'm just trying to get a boy home, he said. There was a tiny pause on the line. When Patel spoke again, her voice was softer. We failed you. And him. In this moment, she said. But I intend to correct that as much as I can. She took a breath, then her tone hardened. Effective immediately, she said, voice carrying through the gate like a gavel strike. This escort is to be granted full pre-board access per policy. Colonel Reed will accompany the remains of Specialist Daniels on Flight 2184. He will be seated in first class, and under no circumstances is he to be separated from that aircraft until it reaches its destination. Mark nodded frantically, already gesturing for the boarding door to be reopened. Yes, he said. Wheel. I'm not finished, she said. He snapped his mouth shut. The director's voice lowered, but in the sudden hush, every syllable was audible. Furthermore, she said, the conduct I have just witnessed from your staff at Gate 37, specifically in dismissing official military documentation, ignoring manifest notes, attempting to check a flag case, calling security on a compliant passenger, and the use of racially charged language, is grounds for immediate review and disciplinary action. The younger agent flinched. I didn't mean you people like that. No one listened. Mark, Patel said icily, until further notice, remove both gate agents from duty. Right now, I'll be speaking with HR and Labor Relations as soon as we hang up. Mark's throat bubbed. He turned slowly to Denise and the young agent. I'm going to have to ask you two to log out and step away from the gate, he said weakly. Turn in your badges at the office. Denise's eyes bulged. What? You can't just... The young agent's voice jumped an octave. Are you firing us? The director's voice cut in, no longer soft at all. To be clear, she said, I am recommending termination for cause pending investigation. Given that thousands of people are already watching this incident online, and that Colonel Reed's counsel is likely already preparing a response, we do not have the luxury of downplaying what happened. The older security officer glanced at Thomas with a raised brow at the word counsel. Thomas shifted, uncomfortable. He began, I'm not looking to. I know what you're looking to, Colonel, Patel said. But you and I also both know the world we live in. There needs to be accountability before there can be repair. Silence. It wasn't the vindictive cheering some might have expected. Instead, the quiet that fell over Gate 37 felt heavy. Complicated. Denise's face crumpled. I was just doing my job, she whispered. We get so many people trying to cut the line. I can't lose this job. I have kids. The younger agent shook his head, anger flaring. So because some old guy has connections, we're the bad guys. This is reverse discrimination or something. Stop, the woman in braids snapped. Just stop. You called security on a man escorting a fallen soldier because you didn't want to check an extra screen, the Marine said. At some point, that stops being a mistake and starts being who you are. Denise looked at Thomas, eyes pleading. There was panic in them, but also a kind of raw fear he recognized from soldiers about to be court-martialed. Please, she said, say something. Tell them I'm not. Tell them I'm not a bad person. I was under pressure. Thomas studied her for a long moment. He saw the stress lines around her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands, the badge that had probably represented years of hard work, the fear behind the defensiveness. He also saw the utter refusal to listen when he had first approached, the way she dismissed his orders, his documents, his very presence, the way she'd watched him be threatened with removal and said nothing. Patel's voice returned, cooler now. Colonel, she said, if you'd prefer to discuss this privately, we can. No, Thomas said quietly. Several heads turned toward him. I think it's better we say what needs saying right here. He picked up his case again and stepped closer to the podium, until he was standing where he had stood minutes before, but the power dynamics had shifted entirely. The younger agent stayed at him, jaw tight. Denise looked ready to cry. Every phone in the gate rose a few inches higher. Thomas rested one hand lightly on the podium. When I walked up here, he said, voice even, I came as a man on a mission. Nothing more, nothing less. That mission was, and is, to bring a young soldier home to his mother with dignity. That's it. He looked at Denise. You didn't see that, he said. You saw an older black man with a suit too old to be expensive and a case you didn't recognize. You saw a problem. He turned his gaze to the younger agent. You saw someone trying to cut the line. Someone you could deny and feel righteous about it. The young man's mouth opened. You don't know what I saw. I know what you said, Thomas replied quietly. I know how quickly you reached for security when your authority was questioned. I know you said, you people. A flicker of shame crossed the young man's face, quickly buried under defensiveness. Thomas exhaled slowly. I've been in rooms where my word meant life or death, he said. Where a young private's boots stayed on his feet because I signed off on it. Where a helicopter launched because I said it needed to. I don't say that to boast. I say that because in those rooms, I learned something about power. He glanced at the phone in Mark's hand, and about what happens when those with power forget it's supposed to serve. Silence. Then Patel spoke again, voice quieter, more personal. Colonel, she said, if you're willing, I'd like you to continue. We're all listening. He nodded once. He turned slightly, so his voice carried to the rows behind. For 30 years, he said, I watched young men and women of every color and creed stand in a straight line and say I do solemnly swear. I watched them bleed the same red, sweat the same sweat, die the same deaths. They once asked me on television, Colonel, does racism exist in the military? And I told them the truth. People bring their biases with them wherever they go. The question is what the system does when those biases show themselves. He gestured at the gate. Today, your biases showed, he said simply, for everyone to see. The young agent bristled. So that's it? I'm a racist forever because of one. No, Thomas said softly. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is who you were in this moment. What you do with that is up to you. Behind them, someone sniffled. The woman in the yellow cardigan wiped her eyes. The reversal was no longer just about him versus them. It was the entire gate looking at itself. He rested his hand more firmly on the flag case, fingers splayed. As for consequences, he continued, I don't get to decide what your airline does. That's between you and your bosses. But I will say this, I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in change. He looked up at Mark. Removing them from this gate is appropriate, he said. People who can't see the humanity in an escort case and a man holding it shouldn't be making decisions at the boarding door today. Mark nodded faintly. But if all that happens is a couple of firings and a press release, Thomas added, voice gaining an edge, then nothing will be different the next time an old black man stands at a podium with a flag and your system forgets his code. Silence again. Even the airport announcements seemed to pause. On the phone, Patel cleared her throat, the sound small but decisive. Understood, she said. You have my word, Colonel, that this will be more than a press release. We will brief the board by the end of the day. We will conduct a full review of our training and our systems failures. And I would like, if you're willing, to invite you to address our leadership once this immediate crisis is past. Thomas hesitated. He thought he was done with conference rooms and PowerPoints. But he thought of Angela Daniels sitting in her small living room hours from now, eyes red, hands twisting a handkerchief as she waited for her boy. He thought of the look on Denise's face, the young agent's defensive anger. He thought of all the times he'd walked through airports in uniform and seen guards stare at him a fraction longer than the white lieutenant beside him. Let's get Marcus home first, he said. Then we'll talk. Yes, sir, Patel replied. And Colonel, there is one more thing. Yes. I've already spoken with our CEO, she said. We're about to issue an internal directive reaffirming that under no circumstances, none, is a military escort to be denied boarding when documented, even in the event of system errors. Your name will be on that directive. And, if you consent, we'd like to release a public statement acknowledging today's failure and your role in helping us correct it. The younger agent made a strangled sound. This is going to ruin me, he whispered. Thomas looked at him, eyes sad. Son, he said quietly, you have a chance to let this break you or change you. Those are not the same thing. The young man swallowed hard. For the first time since the argument began, he looked more scared than angry. The woman with the phone zoomed in on Thomas's face, capturing the lines of tired compassion there. Colonel, Patel said gently, they'll escort you down to the tarmac now to witness the transfer. The captain's been briefed. We're holding the flight until you're ready. Thomas nodded. He bent, wrapped his fingers firmly around the handle of the case, and lifted it. As he walked toward the side door with the security officer, the crowd parted silently, like water. Some people dipped their heads. Some placed hands over hearts. The Marine in the hoodie snapped to a ragged attention, giving a small, sharp salute. Thomas returned it with a flick of his fingers against his brow, brief but precise. Just before he stepped through the door, he paused and turned back. The phones were still up. The live counter ticked higher. He knew then that this moment would not remain confined to Gate 37. By nightfall, there would be hashtags, think pieces, trolls, defenders. His face, older, lined, tired, would be plastered on screens. He did not care about any of that. He looked at the camera, at thousands of unseen faces. Remember, he said softly, when you see someone carrying a flag like this, you're not looking at cargo. You're looking at a promise. Then he stepped through the door, leaving the stunned staff and buzzing gate behind. The internet did what the internet does. By the time Flight 2184 touched down in Chicago, the video from Gate 37 had been viewed more than 2 million times across platforms. By the time it reached Atlanta, Thomas walking behind the flag case as a detail of soldiers carried it down the ramp to Angela Daniels' waiting arms. It had doubled. Hashtags sprouted like weeds. Gate 37, escort respect, on our fallen, old man at the gate. Talk shows ran the footage on loop, slow-motion clips of Thomas lifting the case, still shots of the young agent mid-sneer, Denise's face tight with panic. One network framed it as a story of racism and veteran disrespect. Another, more cynical, tried to splice in commentary about viral outrage culture and the dangers of filming workers. But the raw footage spoke louder than any spin. You could see the sequence so clearly. The dismissal, the escalation, the threat of security, the casual you people, the crowd's shifting mood. And then the reversal. The moment the operations director's voice had crackled over speaker, the way power had flowed away from the podium and settled around the old man with the case. Continental Skyways posted a statement within 12 hours. It was more direct than most corporate apologies. We failed to uphold our policies and values at Gate 37 today, it read. Colonel Thomas Reed, a decorated veteran and long-standing partner in our work with military families, was denied boarding and treated with disrespect while escorting the remains of Specialist Marcus Daniels, United States Army. We have placed the employees involved on immediate leave pending termination proceedings. We are launching a full review of our training and systems to ensure that military escorts and families of the fallen are never again subjected to such treatment. We are deeply sorry. To Colonel Reed, to the Daniels family, and to every service member and family who trusts us with their journeys, we will do better. Some called it a good first step. Others called it not nearly enough. Angela Daniels watched the coverage from her small house in Atlanta, a box of tissues beside her. Her sister clucked disapprovingly at the TV, ready to launch into a speech about respect. Angela just shook her head. "Do you regret asking him?" her sister asked softly. Angela thought of Thomas's steady presence as he'd stood beside her at the cargo doors. The way he'd said her son's name, not like a line item in a report, but like a person. She thought of the way he'd walked behind the case, eyes never leaving the flag. "No," she said firmly. "I don't regret it." In a cramped apartment across town, the younger gate agent, whose name, it turned out, was Tyler, sat on his couch with a laptop open, doom-scrolling through articles. His face stayed back at him from a dozen screenshots. Tyler M., the face of airline racism, one blog called him. Worst gate agent in America, another said, less elegantly. His inbox was full of messages. Some supportive, "This is woke cancel culture blah blah, you didn't do anything wrong," others vicious. His phone had rung with unknown numbers all day. He'd been suspended pending termination, per the email from HR, pending investigation, it said, but there was no mystery about the outcome. He kept replaying the footage in his mind. He heard his own voice, shrill, mocking, ugly. Heard "you people" over and over, cringing each time. It sounded different than it had in his head when he'd said it. He'd meant rude customers, he told himself. Entitled travelers. Not. But even he didn't believe that anymore. He thought about the moment Thomas had said, "I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in change." And he wondered, belatedly, if his own life might need a lot more changing than he'd thought. In a cramped break room behind the gates, Denise sat with her head in her hands. Her phone, face down on the table, buzzed periodically. Her sister. Her kid's school. A reporter. Her badge lay next to it. Plastic and metal, suddenly nothing. Just a piece of hardware that had once stood between hunger and rent. She kept seeing herself on the screen, the way she'd snapped, the way she'd said, "Don't make this about," before cutting herself off. She thought of the times in her life she'd felt dismissed, overlooked, how hard she'd worked to get this job, how many times she'd told herself just follow the rules when customers yelled, how she'd started seeing everyone who questioned her as a threat instead of a person. She remembered the old man's eyes. "You saw a problem," he had said. Her throat ached. "Maybe I did," she whispered to the empty room. The company, for its part, moved fast. It had to. The board called an emergency meeting. PR and legal huddled in a glass-walled conference room, whiteboards filling with timelines and talking points. Someone pulled up the clip of Thomas's final words before he'd walked onto the tarmac. "You're not looking at cargo. You're looking at a promise. Put that in the statement," the PR director said quietly. "If you'll let us." Stop dip for a day. For a moment, analysts speculated about long-term damage. But the airline was big, people's memories short, and there were always other outrages. What lingered longer than the stock fluctuation were the calls. Military families, veterans, black travelers with stories of being randomly selected one too many times. The phone lines were flooded with complaints and memories and demands for change. And because Colonel Reed had agreed, after some coaxing from Maya, who pointed out that "Granddad, you always tell me to stand up where I can make a difference," he found himself once again in a boardroom, weeks later. The room felt much like the ones he'd sat in years before. Cold, glass-walled, the skyline sprawling beyond. But the faces were younger, more diverse, more tired. They listened as he spoke again, not about policy codes or escort procedures this time, but about dignity, about what it feels like to be doubted at a glance, to be treated as a problem in uniform and out. Some shifted in their chairs. Some took furious notes. Some looked ashamed. He did not gloat. He told stories. Of soldiers. Of families. Of the small mercies that had meant the world in airports. A gate agent who'd stepped out from behind the podium to walk with a widow. A pilot who'd come down to the tarmac to stand in silence as a flag case passed. He also told them about that morning. About Denise's tight smile. Tyler's snay. "I'm not here to get anyone fired," he said. "That's done. I'm here so you'll ask better questions when you hire the next ones." He did not know that down on the ground, outside the building, a group of employees had gathered with signs. "We stand with Cole Reed," one read. "Training, not just talk." Read another. The reversal continued in ripples. Months passed before anyone saw the full speech. The airline had invited Thomas to deliver a short address at their annual honoring service event, an occasion that, in previous years, had been little more than a glossy marketing showcase. This year, the room felt different. The ballroom was full, employees from every level, from baggage handlers to executives. Cameras were set up discreetly, streaming the event internally and to a few invited media outlets. On stage, behind the podium, a large screen showed a still image, a flag case on a tarmac, a silhouette of a man walking behind it. Thomas stood off to the side, hands folded on the handle of his cane, not because he needed it all the time, but because days with long speeches and longer receptions wore on his joints. Maya stood in the wings, nerves buzzing under her skin. She'd come to support him, yes, but also because she didn't trust these people not to spin his words. She'd insisted on streaming from her own phone too. "Granddad, remember, keep it under 20, she'd whispered. "They said they are streaming it all. You don't have to rush, but..." He'd chuckled. "Since when did I ever say anything under 20? "Well, you're famous now," she teased. "Famous people have time limits." When they called his name, "Please welcome Colonel Thomas Reed, United States Army, retired," the room rose in a standing ovation. He winced internally. He had no taste for applause. He stepped up to the podium anyway, notes in his pocket untouched. He looked out over the sea of faces. He saw Denise, sitting near the back, invited as part of a new listening session program. She'd been offered her job back in a different department after completing extensive training and counseling. It wasn't a neat redemption arc, but it was a start. He saw Tyler wasn't there. Last he'd heard, the young man had taken a job at a community center, working with at-risk youth. They'd exchanged one letter, awkward, halting. Tyler had written, "I'm trying to be the man you told me I could be instead of the man I was at that gate." He hoped the boy meant it. He saw Angela Daniels, sitting in the front row, a small gold star pin on her dress. Beside her, a small empty chair with a folded photo of Marcus on the seat. He took a breath. "Good evening," he said. The room quieted. "I've been asked to talk to you about dignity," he said. "About bias. About justice. And about how all of those things collided one morning at Gate 37. A faint ripple went through the crowd at the name. "I could stand up here and tell you a blow-by-blow of what happened," he said. "But most of you have seen the video. Some of you were in that room. Some of you, I imagine, are tired of hearing about it." Soft, embarrassed chuckles. He smiled slightly. "So instead," he said, "I'm going to tell you about a different morning." He talked then about an airstrip overseas, years before. About a young private who had tripped during a transfer, almost dropping a flag. About the way the colonel, his youngest self, had reacted. "I didn't yell," he said. "I didn't haul him in front of his whole unit and shame him. I took him aside. I asked, 'Son, when you picked up that case, what were you thinking about?' He said, 'Sir, I was thinking about not messing up.' Laughter, soft and rueful. I told him, 'Next time, think about the man inside.'" He looked around the ballroom. "That's what dignity is," he said. "It's remembering the person inside the case. Inside the uniform. Inside the skin you've been trained to fear or dismiss." He spoke of bias then, not in accusatory tones, but as a fact of human life. "We all have stories we tell ourselves when we look at people," he said. "Shortcuts. This one is dangerous. This one is important. This one is trouble. Sometimes those stories come from personal experience. Often they come from the air we breathe, what we've seen on TV, how we were raised, what we were told about those people. He let the words hang. Bias isn't a moral failing, he said quietly. What you do with it is. He talked about Denise's fear of being reprimanded for breaking rules, about Tyler's defensiveness when his authority was questioned. He did not name them, but the room knew. Power without reflection, he said, is a dangerous thing to put behind a podium. He spoke of accountability, not as punishment, but as the path to growth. Accountability says, yes, I did this. Yes, it harmed someone. Yes, I'm going to change, he said. It doesn't hide behind policies. It doesn't say, I was just doing my job. He talked then about kindness. Kindness is not fuzzy, he said, wrinkling his nose. It's not soft. It's not letting anyone do whatever they want. Kindness is a discipline. It's a choice you make when you're tired, when the line is long, when the system crashed, when the old man in front of you reminds you of every argument you've had with your grandfather. Polite laughter. Kindness is looking at the man with the flag case and thinking, before you think anything else, somebody trusted him with someone they loved. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred. I'm not perfect, he said. I've yelled at my share of gate agents over the years. I've snapped at people who didn't deserve it. I carry my own biases. But every time I walk behind a flag, I am reminded of something I want you to remember too. He looked up again, gaze sweeping the room. We are all escorts, he said. A tiny frown line appeared on someone's forehead in the front row. He smiled gently. Not all of us in the formal sense, he said. But every day, you escort someone's mother, someone's child, someone's brother from one place to another. You escort them through your workplace, through your policies, through your patience, or lack of it. He let the words sink in. You get to decide, he said, whether you will walk with them in dignity or push them toward the jet bridge with suspicion and contempt. He paused. Across the room, even clinking glasses stopped. Gate 37 wasn't just about me, he said. It was about all the quiet gates before it where someone else didn't have a live stream, where no one above the podium picked up the phone, where the old black man without a plaque in your lobby swallowed the insult and sat down. Silence. I don't want your guilt, he added, voice softening. I want your courage. He thought of Maya's insistence that he be quotable. He thought of the thousands of strangers who would clip this speech, share it, argue in the comments. I want you to ask yourself, every time you're handed a little bit of power, he said, who am I escorting right now? And would I be proud if the way I treated them was broadcast to the world? He stepped back then, letting the enormity of that question settle. He closed with a promise. Every time I'm asked to walk behind a flag, he said, I will do it as long as my legs hold me. That is my purpose. Your purpose may be different. But if we meet again at a gate someday, I hope we recognize in each other the same thing. He smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. A commitment, he said, to never let another promise be treated like cargo. The room rose again, slowly this time. The applause was less frenetic, more thoughtful. His words were clipped into a 3-minute highlight reel that night, shared and reshared. Some rolled their eyes at yet another viral speech. Others saved it, watched it twice. A flight attendant in Denver played it on her phone in the crew lounge and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. A baggage handler in Newark nodded along, thinking of the nameless bodies he'd carried over the years. A young gate agent in Phoenix, newly hired, fresh from training that now included a mandatory module on dignity at the gate featuring footage from Gate 37, watched and decided that if she ever made a mistake like that, she'd own it. By the time autumn came around, Gate 37 looked different. Not visually. It was still the same rows of gray chairs, the same scuffed carpet, the same weary travelers wrestling strollers and backpacks. But in subtle ways, the air had changed. There was a new plaque on the wall near the boarding podium. In honor of all who escort and all who are escorted, it read. Dedicated in partnership with Colonel Thomas Reed, USA, Ret. Beneath it, in smaller letters, you are not looking at cargo. You are looking at a promise. Flight crews sometimes ran their fingers over those words as they passed. New hire classes were brought there during orientation. Trainers pointed at the plaque and told the story, not with PR spin, but with a kind of reverent honesty. This is where we messed up, they'd say. And this is where we chose to try to do better. Not every change was grand. Some was simple. A new button in the booking system, highlighted in red, made escort codes impossible to miss. If you tried to close a reservation with a military escort without adding the proper notes, a warning popped up. Are you sure you want to proceed without verifying escort status? In the employee portal, a video titled Dignity in Practice was mandatory viewing. The first scene was not Gate 37. It was a quiet moment of a gate agent stepping out from behind the counter to kneel so she could look a woman in a wheelchair in the eye as she explained a delay. Later in the video, Gate 37 appeared. They did not blur Thomas's face. They did not blur Tyler's. They had asked his permission. He had given it, on the condition that any profits from training materials go to a fund. That fund, months later, paid for the first semester of a scholarship for Marcus Daniels's little sister, Jasmine, who'd written him a shaky letter saying she wanted to study nursing so she could take care of people the way you took care of my brother's body. On a crisp afternoon, Thomas stood in his modest yard, raking leaves. Maya sat on the porch steps, a laptop open, headphones around her neck. "You're trending again," she called. He snorted. "Lord help us. It's good this time," she said. "Someone stitched your speech with a clip of a gate agent doing it right. Helping a veteran in a wheelchair get down the jet bridge. They titled it This Is How You Escort." He leaned on the rake, letting himself smile. "Maybe they are finally learning," he said. "Maybe," she agreed. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Colonel. This is Tyler. I got your letter. I'm working at a community center now. We help kids who don't get a lot of second chances. Thought you'd want to know I'm trying to use my power better, like you said." He read it twice. Then, slowly, he typed, "Thank you for telling me. Keep at it. Change isn't a straight line. But every time you choose to see the person instead of the problem, you're walking in the right direction." He hit send. He looked up at the sky, streaked with the faint white scars of jet trails. "Another escort today," he said softly. He was right. Somewhere, in another airport, another old man or woman walked behind a flag. The systems were still imperfect. Bias still lived in the edges of people's eyes. There were still days when someone was treated as a problem first, a person second. But there were more people watching now. More phones ready to record. More employees who had seen his speech, heard the story, and thought, when a situation bristled, who am I escorting right now? At Gate 37, a young agent, fresh to the job, nervous hands smoothed over her blazer, looked up as an older black woman approached, carrying a battered backpack and an envelope of documents. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I'm supposed to be escorting my husband's remains. They told me to come here, but I don't really understand how it all works." The agent's heart jumped. She glanced at her screen. She saw the red highlighted code, the name, the word escort. She stepped out from behind the podium, coming around until she stood beside the woman instead of opposite her. "We'll walk through it together," she said gently. "You won't have to be alone with this. Not for a second." The woman's shoulders sagged in gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was scared I'd mess something up." "You won't," the agent said. "He's in good hands. You both are." Someone in the waiting area watched their interaction and smiled a little. In his living room, Thomas's TV murmured in the background, the sound low. He wasn't watching the news. He'd had enough of hearing his own name. He was reading a letter instead. This one was from a teenager. "Dear Colonel Reed," it said. "My dad showed me the Gate 37 video after I said something stupid about those people at school. We watched it together and talked. I realized I don't want to be the kind of person who needs a whole internet outrage to see when I'm wrong. I just wanted to say thank you for making me think." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box on the shelf. The box was almost full now. Letters, clippings, notes. Testimonies of tiny transformations. He was not naive. He knew systems took more than one incident to change. He knew there would be other gates, other mornings, other old men without camera phones to protect them. But he also knew this. A promise kept once had a way of echoing. He picked up his calendar from the coffee table, flipping to the next month. 2 dates circled. 1. Another escort mission. 2. A trip to a small town where a school had named their new scholarship award after specialist Marcus Daniels. He touched each circle briefly, then set the calendar down. As long as he could walk, he would keep escorting. When he could no longer walk, he would speak. When he could no longer speak, he hoped the words he'd already said would carry. 8. The question. You weren't there at gate 37. You didn't see the way the fluorescent lights buzzed or smell the faint tang of coffee and jet fuel. You didn't hear the exact timbre of Thomas Reed's voice or feel the awkward shifting of strangers in plastic chairs. But you've been somewhere like it. A line at a checkout, a front desk at a hospital, a classroom doorway, a comments section. You've stood with a little bit of power in your hands. Your job title, your tone, your majority status, your camera, your silence. You felt the tug of your own stories about those people, whatever those meant to you. You've watched someone being treated as a problem. Maybe you stepped in. Maybe you looked away. Maybe you laughed nervously or told yourself it wasn't your business. Maybe no one was recording. So here's the question that gate 37 leaves behind, drifting like a contrail across your day. The next time you're standing at your own gate, literal or otherwise, and someone approaches you carrying a promise you don't yet understand, will you see cargo, or will you choose to see the person inside? And if someone near you is being humiliated, doubted, or dismissed, will you stay in your seat? Or will you stand, even just a little, and help escort them through?